Good morning, everyone. And thank you for coming on a kind of a rainy Saturday morning. Uh, and thank you, Amishi, for a wonderful introduction. And I think, when you guys started Creative Mornings, 11 years back, I attended the first few ones. So it's kind of incredible to see how far you guys have come, and really honored to be on the other side of the stage this time around. So, let's start with I think the first thing, let me just start with the idea of, I think a lot of you people who are here might know the project Street Type Archive, if I'm not mistaken, which documents a lot of typography and in the built environment. But I also document the city with the similar kind of a ethos of the lens through which I'm documenting type. And the first question would be what does that have to do with, with punk or today's theme? And I think some of the principles in the punk philosophy kind of fits right into the way I'm trying to see the city, and which would be trying to find beauty, finding rawness, raw beauty in the system, to kind of make it yourself. A lot of these projects don't have a sense of you try to figure out, you struggle with trying to find funding or trying to find an audience, but so you kind of have to make up the rules as you go along. And one of the things that kind of guides me, and we'll see in today's talk, one is that I try to look at the city as if something, it's a living, breathing thing which is talking back to me, and my job as an artist is to listen and respond to that. So the first section, we're going to look at city as a canvas, in which I'm going to show a couple of projects, starting with Street Type Archive, which looks at the typography of the places. Sorry, 1 second. So for me, a city is a kind of a canvas. It's messy, it's layered, it's always changing. And especially in Indian cities, everywhere you look, there's bits of text, posters, scribbles, cracks in the walls, things that weren't meant to be art necessarily, but in this kind of this alchemy of things that when they kind of come together, they kind of reveal something else about the place. And with the Street Type with the Street Type Archive, the stories that I've been kind of able to find over the years not only look at culture in a sense of the people and the history of type, for example, but also the unintentional, accidental overlaps of different languages and stuff kind of coming in. In a way, it's as it says, the fragments of letters, materials, and architecture kind of coming together and forming a raw archive of I'd like to see it as a city's memory, which is evolving. And you find these things in a very interesting manner. They manifest themselves into informal maps of neighborhoods, which I think it's a far more interesting, personal, richer experience to have a map of your own locality in a certain way. But working on this project has also shown me the different layers and different styles of people, of ways that type kind of presents itself in the environment to us. So from hand scribbles to even beautifully hand painted, to even carved and set in stone. And if you look close enough, or if you look into the right kind of neighborhoods, you'll also start seeing the layers of history that, as I spoke about, how they kind of coalesce and interact with one another, creating a new visual language, if you will. it's such a busy, I mean, like in this particular photograph you see, like it's such a busy scene of literally like 100 years of Bombay's history, and and you can find little clues into what the business is, what the people, what the kind of the artistic styles were prevalent at that point of time. Um, and I also love the way some of the old broken signs reflect back on the idea of kind of collage, and but like these are not collages made by somebody, but by I guess by time itself, and how it kind of presents itself in bits and pieces, and that's something that kind of really really like draws me in. And as I've been working on the project, it's also becoming, I've been doing it for 15 years, this particular project, and it's like a different kind of memory of the city kind of presents itself, and a lot of these old signs which which are fast disappearing, and even with changes in language and style, I think getting a chance to document and traveling all over makes it very interesting and good for myself. And even and even in like in a city like Bombay, where bureaucracy is always kind of playing it's kind of like playing it's almost like mocking ourselves, but the ideas and like the and even the language, the way it is used is kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know if anybody noticed, like dhoka would not be the right word that will come to your mind when you think of danger, but in the context of Bombay, it just, I think, feels very right, that everything just feels like that. And some of it is things, as I said, like unexpected layers, which you will find things to do, like, but somehow it's Bombay, so it kind of makes sense in a way. One of the things that is, I suppose, besides finding the old type, whether it's something raw and distressed or something very like or an art deco sign or a very new sign or typography as we encounter it, one thing that's always going to be clear is that as technology kind of changes, we are coming to a newer expression of how we encounter type in a city. So, but before, what I mean by that is like technology which is coming in with a lot of screens which are coming in. But like what we really kind of like have to acknowledge and kind of appreciate is some of the older diversities that you would be able to see in a city and going around in regional text or different styles of expressing yourself, and how that kind of comes, how that has always kind of found a way to be together. And I think the challenges ahead would be how do you make sense of the future when everything else seems kind of disparate. Ultimately, as I said, like found type is also a very personal expression, and with that, I mean, I also would like to just wish everyone Eid Mubarak, I suppose. So what's that future looks like in terms of type? I mean, we have, I believe, I've been back in Bombay for almost a year now, and even in that past year, the number of screens which have just kind of come up on the street level as well. So whether you are walking around, I mean, bus stops or highways, and all of the traditional billboards have also kind of been changed into these glowing objects which kind of are almost kind of always changing, and they're very dynamic. So it's, in a way it's exciting, but what happens is I think the question remains, what happens to us when everything is forever changing and we never have a time to just kind of sit down and reflect on things. But I wish that was it. But the wise heads at BMC also thought it would be a great idea to kind of replace the sunset at Juhu Beach for a while. And this, I don't know if anybody saw this in in person. Yeah, it was quite an incredible thing to kind of be part of and witness. I think with this particular image, I think, and one of the reasons I really like this image, and it is an image about typography and about the culture in that sense, is that what happens when we are in this kind of rat race of getting into, keeping up with technology and changing with things. One of the so in order to root me in with my thinking, one of the architects that I was reading about is a Dutch architect, Rem Koolhaas, and then he had come up with a term called junk space, which kind of simply put his idea is like what remains after modernization has kind of run its course. And he kind of compared it to the idea of once, like how space junk is a word where we have a lot of these things. So what happens on Earth when we are not building with meaning, but we are just kind of building to meet deadlines, I suppose. So I think one of my fears is how does the future look like in terms of whether it's in arts or whether in this context I'm looking at typography on a street level, for example. So yeah, those are questions to ponder. But it's not all doom and gloom, because I think this would be a right time to get into product placement. So one of the things working on the project that and when you're working on a project for many, many years, it's kind of like, you've seen that meme of the guy from It's Sunny in Philadelphia when he's trying to explain things, and it's just, which is kind of a version of it is happening right now, but coming back to after working on the project for around over a decade, I had all of these photographs from different time periods and different cities, and I wanted to figure out a way, how do I tell this story, or how do I make this story available in a different context, which is just beyond type. So we started making these zines last year. I say we because this project, as much as I've been photographing it, it's only possible because of my really wonderful friends and family who've been quite supportive. Some of them are right here. I would like to shout out especially to Nupur. Nupur is somewhere here. Nupur and Sarang, who run Egg Type, and Nupur and Tanya, Tanya is a type designer, and she does incredible walks about type in the city. These guys have been so helpful, and without Nupur, I don't think these zines would have come out. And we're also celebrating the first year anniversary of that. We started coming out with these zines last year in June. But what the zines kind of allowed us was to kind of present a product out there which you could collect as photographs, as little posters, but they also had little field notes which kind of gave context to some of these smaller, lesser stories. So we used that Bombay story through the restaurant signages to kind of tell a story of cosmopolitanism and diversity of Bombay as a place. We went to a small town in Gujarat, which turned out to be a really kind of like a treasure trove for Indo Art Deco kind of architecture and innovations in Gujarati type that came out of that. And we went to Madurai, and we looked at how Meenakshi temple kind of influences the market and the commerce of this old city, and how kind of religion and design and markets are kind of coalesced into one another. And the most exciting one for me as well was to able to take this project outside of India. I did a we did a show with these zines and in the incredible Bombay Zine Fest. I think I've seen some people who were at the Zine Fest as well. So, hi guys. But after doing that in last November, in January, I had an opportunity to take this to Osaka in Japan and do a small show where the neighborhood where the show was happening, I had documented the markets of that place as well, and we made a zine around that. And it was incredible to see the local residents kind of like interacting with and seeing the neighborhood in a different lens. So, and I think that's one of the things about street type and the zines that where I really love that it's been enriching over the years to do that. Um, but today I wanted to show and share some more work which kind of shares the same, I think, philosophical bent as what you've seen in some of the Street Type Archives work. And if you've seen the Street Type Archives work online as well, then you might see some parallels in that. But keeping that same theme of the city as a canvas, another way I kind of try to look at the city in itself is literally how do I turn the everyday and the mundane into something which might be completely, totally abstract. And the challenge in that, again, is how do you take some of the pain points of the city or the situations you might find yourself in and turn it into something which is, I don't know, like something which makes sense to me. I'll be honest. Most of, like, I think a lot of times when people are working on stuff, like they're just doing it. How do I make sense of this to me? And then we can figure out how to share it with the world. So this couple of photographs and these were taken in from a taxi, which had a kind of a broken window, and it wasn't raining. But then, I was very annoyed because of the broken window, and then there was like a lot of, and it was hot and it was muggy, and I was like, it wasn't at all a pleasant day to be in a taxi with a broken window. But then, from a corner of my eye, I was looking at that, and the kind of the world presented itself in a very different way, and so I went around was very happy to take photographs of that. In a similar way, I try to use the same ideas of how do you use crowd and chaos of the everyday thing to your advantage. And these couple of portraits made of my friend in Tokyo, we wanted to get, we were trying different, she wanted some photographs, we were trying a bunch of things, and it wasn't working. There was just way too many people, it was way too busy. But then, the idea there was to how do I kind of like tap into something? How do you make the situation your own? How do you, respond to it and use those pain points, like having the two people like, in front of the frame. For me, this photo should not be there, but like it turned out to be my favorite ones from the session that we ended up doing in that. And similarly, as I said, like the city is always speaking to us. It's reflecting back. So you can find bits and bobs of, like emotions and people kind of looking back at you in different ways and different mirrors and stuff like that. So it's quite incredible as a photographer, as a part of the practice of just being out there and interacting with the city on a day-to-day kind of a basis to kind of force yourself to really listen and see what it's presenting. I think turns out to be quite a great creative exercise, which I'm really, really lucky and happy that I get to do. Because, one of the other authors that I was reading in me trying to make sense of the work that I wanted to make about the cities and places is a French anthropologist, Marc Augy. And he talks about this idea of non-places, and which is very similar to what Ren Koolhaas talked about junk space and another idea of his generic city. And not non-places and generic city, basically what they talk about is they were writing these theses in the late 1990s about how airports, malls, and a lot of these places which are very generic tend to be kind of become non-places because they are overtly designed for us to experience things in a very high efficiency mode. Because in a mall, you're just, it's all about commerce. In an airport, you're just supposed to go to this and that. And I think what's kind of become tragic over the years is the urban planning of the 21st century is that instead of these ideas of the generic spaces and the non places, instead of being rooted in malls and airports, I think we started to design cities in that way, and we started to design environments in that particular way. So I think with another thing with abstraction that can come in is like you're again forced to find beauty in the idea of ugliness. I always thought, like a seascape or like being by the ocean, like the last thing you would want is if you're sitting by the beach side is to have a train tracks right in front of you between you and the ocean itself. In a similar way, like the earlier photograph of the billboard in the ocean, right? But in this particular case, like this is in Sri Lanka, these trains go up and down the whole day, but instead of being kind of annoyed with like, oh no, my view got screwed, I tried to figure out a way, how do I turn it into something which could become part of the environment? How can you turn this into a photograph? So these are, sorry, I should also suppose I should say it because it's 2025. None of these photographs are generated from AI. These are photographs, camera, tripod, time, and luck. So, but it was quite incredible. I mean, I found myself in that the Airbnb that we were staying at. There was no AC. I was already annoyed about that, and the trains were there. But then something kind of clicked. Then I found myself like 3-4 days of living there, waking up at 4 a.m. till like 9 a.m. where these trains were going up and down, making dozens of photographs of the sea, the moon, the trains, and the whole landscape. And it was, a really incredible experience of traveling and making photographs in that way. So I'm kind of moving on to the second section of this. In this also I will be presenting two kind of projects. And this was actually kind of exciting because showing two projects which are also kind of works in progress, and I don't think anybody has seen these yet. So it's going to be, I'm also equally excited or apprehensive. But building on the ideas, as I just talked about, especially of generic cities, non-spaces, and junk space, and all of that, like how does the city speak to us? I've started to see, and especially in Bombay, the way the constructions and the way the Bombay is in the state, there is no other way to see the city but as a collage, to make sense of it, like somehow these pieces which don't belong to one another and have no inherent logic to it will make sense. So, but in order to do that, I went around traveling all over Bombay, up and down in a lot of auto rickshaws, a lot of taxis, which meant a lot of traffic jams, a lot of gaddhas and potholes and such. This is a kind of a fun little thing that I found myself doing every time I would be stuck in a traffic jam in an auto rickshaw. You've seen those "Don't touch me" written out in those meters, which is supposed to be in a way like it's a calling. It's like don't touch the meter. It's like the meter might be fragile itself, right? Like that's the intention of it. Like don't tamper with that thing. And for me, it was like, what if the city is kind of speaking to you? Or what if we are the ones, like we are also very fragile and and navigating the city in a day-to-day kind of just becomes like, don't. So, and what was interesting in this, like, a lot of my different worlds kind of coming in. I was also interested in the type of this, the hand-painted types mixed with the stickers and so on and so forth, but also like just the kind of like, I find it very humorous. It's like it's such a rude thing to say, to imbibe, but more you kind of look at it, the more you kind of see it on a day-to-day basis, it's something which feels like it does feel that, and it does speak to about like the struggle that we have, I guess, in the city of finding our own space, or just to be, I suppose, respected with your own agency. So this was a show, like a small little fun series that I ended up doing. this also is it's basically it's multiple exposures. It's two photographs. One of them has been kind of rendered in a black and white channel that to bring out the text, and the overlaid on the other one, which I thought was kind of fun way to look at the thing, and the kind of patterns and the styles that it started kind of coming. So it gave me some idea in terms of like, okay, what if, I document around 1,000 of these? What is the visual language that will come out of that? And so on, so on. I mean, this is where the narrator says he has not documented 1,000 of these yet, but we'll get them. But in a way that it's this feels like how my relationship or how with the city is, or how a lot of people's relationship with the city is, and how it could be also seen in different multiple lenses, but sometimes, it's not always don't touch me. Sometimes it is just do touch me. But I think that the important thing is consent is everything. So you gotta do that, no matter what you're into. So, yeah. All right. Let's come to the last one. We're quite excited about this one. So this is a series called Bombay Sandwich. It's simply put, is the photographs as found of the progress and the architecture of the city as it stands in 2025. And I have to imagine, so there was a quote I came across from a writer called Joseph Conrad, and he describes the city as kind of being like a knitting machine, like a machine which has kind of come of its own, and all it does is it knits, and it knits kind of beautiful. I mean, it just knits over and over, like without any kind of thought. It just goes over but his struggle was like he wanted that machine to kind of embroider and to do beautiful embroidery and make beautiful things, and which is kind of like a silly it's a folly to kind of like imagine a machine which is well oiled and made to just do one thing and one thing well. How will that ever learn to do learn beauty or embroidery in that case? And in a way, I find the city and the architecture of the city to be kind of like very violent and oppressive in ways which just seems very unimaginable or unfathomable, But that's the nature of progress, We are going to, if you're going to be the, I don't know, whatever, the top economy of the world or whatever we are going for, if you follow that logic, that progress and making these buildings and making homes is going to take a very absurd kind of a shape into it. This is a quote from that Joseph Conrad's thing, and it knits us in, it knits us out. It has knitted time, space, pain, death, corruption, despair, and all the illusions, and nothing matters. I admit, however, that to look at the remorseless process is sometimes amusing. And that is where the Venn diagram of my mental state is. Just to find, if you can't do anything about the system you find yourself in, or the city in a way, I was like, if I can't do it, let me pay attention to what the city itself is doing. Let me find a way which is amusing. So a lot of these photographs, I mean, come on, if you find yourself stuck in this traffic jam and you look at this scene on a day in, day out, you need to believe in irony. You need to realize so that you can get to wherever you're going. But there is a kind of a brutal beauty in all of this as well. For me, these buildings kind of become like, imagine like alien spaceships have just kind of landed and is like taking over and emerging, and they've already part of that, part of the landscape in a very weird way. In this, the one the picture with the textile mills, that's one of the last mills, which is also kind of left, which is also like a harking back at the history of the city, which we are only happy to kind of forget, or I guess in any cities. The Navroz Bagh, those towers kind of like just almost beaming out in the background, again coming back to this idea of like a full-on alien, and we just find ourselves in the middle of an alien invasion, and then we're just trying to survive and make sense of things, of where there was once nature, erupts, glass and steel from rubble, and any angle of the city you'll find these new modern beacons of, I guess, prosperity and progress. But at the same time, you'll see tucked away in the corners some of the old, the old clues and the old things of what made the city, what kind of made it interesting for us. So even if you see the signs of life, as it were, they're always there. You just have to kind of like peek in and look at that and look for it rather, because as I said, the city is always kind of speaking to us, whether through scaffolding and green tops, under bridges, through layers and layers of nothingness, and the ceaseless construction that has kind of engulfed the entire city as we speak, as we see. Even the beacons of the rich and the very famous, but taste can't be bought, I suppose. But the last writer that I will kind of reference to was a French, of all things, a French priest. But he wrote a very wonderful book called The Practice of Everyday Life, Michel de Certeau. And he kind of talked about the act of walking or act of participating in a city was, in a way, you had to kind of poach your own space from the system that would be. And he always talked about making, you can make a whole city with a grid, but then people will always find a little shortcut or find ways to kind of navigate the place. And I think those little spaces of where, you'll find a chai wala under a Lodha building or something like that, these things that emerge, they are still there, they're part of the thing. There's part of it's a very kind of quiet resistance. In this particular photographs as well, if you see in the back layers, you have this modern construction kind of coming in, but then you have this kind of life and people who are part of these layers of things which are on a day-to-day thing. And admittedly, some of it is just it just makes no sense. It's just like layers upon layers upon layers upon things. And it does seem almost very sad. It almost feels like there's a teardrop kind of coming down, even from the buildings themselves. So, but again, all is not lost. I would, as part of this project itself, how do you find hope? And for me, in this particular quote, also, kind of helped guide me through the right direction. More than the utilitarian and the technocratic transparency, it is the opaque ambivalence of its oddities that makes the city livable. And I quite love that. Love that the oddness of everyday encounters, as we've seen in photographs. I love these balconies with different clothes and hanging out. I don't find them to be an eyesore. I find them to be quite organic and beautiful, so to speak. So the city is resisting. There could be a tower which just looks like a glitch in the system emerging from the back, but there will always be somebody hanging their towel and finding a space. It might be all going away. It may not make sense, but somehow the the resistance of things, a resistance of its people and its architecture will emerge, creating a new kind of a visual language, a new clues, leaving behind traces of who we were, that we were here, we were part of this. Even though it may seem very ominous, there's always beauty to be kind of found and looked upon. And for me, these sets of photographs of the Bombay city as well, all of these buildings which are kind of going under renovation or kind of going on its way out, these are the last cries of their, that, hey, we were here, we had a good time. Even in the one on the left, I quite love the fact that with that giant tower, you still have the last of the mill, the old architecture, but I'm more interested in that little tree kind of coming out of the blue tinned roof. And on the other side as well, like life kind of goes on, the girl going to school, early morning, I forget which one of the bridges it is. Parel, I think, near Parel. So the old and the new will kind of figure out a way. I think the city itself will kind of find a way. Bombay will figure out, from the old 1970s spaceship kind of fading out into the new glass and feel coming in. But there are moments of grace that we need to kind of look for. And that's what this kind of project that I'm working on hopes to kind of do. Even when, and sometimes it surprises me as well, because it's like the metro has been going on. I think I was, ever since I think my father was a 5-year-old boy. So they've been trying to build the metro. But when you go to some of these sites where they're still building on the metro, it's quite amazing. Like there's a new kind of a visual language and art kind of coming out of these overlaid logos and signs that they have been making about it's all coming together. Mumbai is upgrading. The bridges themselves have kind of started to speak out themselves. Like कितना time हो गया यार बना दो खत्म करो. So there is kind of this, as I said, like a brutal beauty to be found, and that's what this kind of project is starting to do, to find these clues, to tie it all together, whether it's type, whether it's architecture, whether it's a city in itself. Even in the face of, absurdity, I think there's ways to find beauty. And that's what I'm trying to do, because the city is a rebel. Thank you.